Hello everyone, this is Mr. Reader Blades here, and I'd like to start off by this, of course, by saying that this is a podcast type of thing, and that is meant to be heard, not seen. What I'm going to do is twist on this video and start off by saying this is a conversational piece. I would like to really see those comments down below on how my views may be wrong. But before we get into it, I just want to say that this video is probably, as the title says, current versus past. I'm going to be going over a few topics that I feel are failing and need really to be worked on in new expansions. Classes, quests, overall feel, and the depth of major villains that seem to be not coming back with new ones that just come out of new expansions. Let's start with classes. Changes on MMO are rampant. Without change, classes will become boring and stagnant. But will the classes feel the same? Will the player base still like the class? No one will ever know. But when I go back to old classes that I played in the past, I doesn't feel like I'm even playing the same spec anymore. Is that a good thing? Probably. But I view that because of class fantasy, the fantasy of the classes have actually been taken away a little bit. That just because it doesn't perfectly fit class fantasy doesn't mean it needs to be pruned and removed. This is a game. This isn't. This is a video game. This isn't a RPG. It is MMORPG, but it is not a role-playing game. As in, you are literally rolling dice. This isn't D&D where things have to completely stick to the fantasy of a class. You can do some liberties, and I think those liberties should be taken. I'm going to go on to DPS. The evolution of DPS. When GC, and this is on the my last video, how GCD changed. Almost previously, almost everything was on GCD, which wasn't a problem. DPS was still smooth, but the classes were designed around that. I feel that with the classes being more smoothed out, that there would be no need for class fantasy, and you could really start just having fun with the classes. I don't think DPS really needs utility. The utility of a DPS is to kill the boss. Some utility is nice, but make it rare. Don't make it, oh, this DPS has this utility. Just have them have, if they lack of utility, just make them a stronger raw DPS numbers. Simple as that. Have that be their utility. They don't do anything necessarily that would help counter boss mechanics, but having more of them won't hurt either because they just output no more DPS. That would be fine. And I think in this problem would just move out a lot of classes. Rogues. I think if a rogue would be able to kind of disorientate a boss. And not in the sense of vet their CC, but more in the sense of if a melee hit or a spell would have killed a tank, the disorient would actually prevent it from ever being cast. Almost like a kick, which could be led to abuse, but I'm just saying this as an example. Bring more flavor as actual the classes themselves, if you want to bring class fantasy, would be awesome. Tanks. I feel that the massive prune of tank abilities and the reduction of magical reduction is kind of, in my opinion, dumb. You want to bring on class fantasy, but one of the tanks, specifically the Death Knight, is all about countering magic. They use runes to absorb enemies' magic. They use dark magic to destroy their foes. Why isn't that depicted in game? Why is a Death Knight weak will now be weak to magic when that was their primary counter was magic? Warriors should be weak to magic because they're just the average warrior. And overall, I think game design is facing game fantasy. And maybe one day they might decide that this isn't working out and just scrap class fantasy. As an overall thing, I think classes need to change in a way that matches game design and gameplay. I feel that some classes and some specs are always the victim of game design. And then the gameplay suffers. It feels clunky, and there's always this spec that just mess at the beginning of an expansion and doesn't really improve. And you have to wait for the next expansion to hope that it really smooths out again. I hope that new classes, if they're added, don't suffer from this problem, but a lot of the previous specs have. Marksman hunters in BFA are being reported as fairly clunky. Hunters have always been a little bit clunky for the past two expansions. That being BFA and Alpha. There's always in Legion. BFA has not been released, but Marksman being clunky on a few attempts is an issue. You then there was the issue with Beastmaster being clunky without the shoulder legendaries, and then finally they decided to bake in the legendary effect to Beastmaster, and then change that legendary. I think overall, classes just need to be looked at more as a micro thing, as their own thing in a vacuum, really, and really test the classes individually, and really have the people renowned for those classes test them. My next point will be quests. Quests are, and more specific quest lines. I feel in Legion, Warlords of Draenor, and sometimes even Mists of Pandaria, which was really began, is that the epic quest line is dead. There, there are some memorial quest lines, some quest lines that you look, oh, that's a really good quest line, but there's no epic quest line. There is no Wrathgate quest line. There is no Broken Hilt quest line. There are any of these quest lines that were considered epic or even legendary in the past. I don't feel like those exist. I have personally done the Broken Hilt questline and the Wrathgate questline. Sadly, I did not do the Wrathgate questline during Wrath, But I knew what was happening. I knew what was going to happen, and that kind of ruined it. But it still felt epic that I was doing it. I never really felt that in Legion. Just felt like I was getting some objects for unlocking a tomb that wasn't gonna be unlocked for months. The lack of epic quest lines is, at least for me, led while being boring in lore. Why enjoy the history? Why enjoy quest lines when you know it's not gonna be impactful? I feel that quest lines need to be more impactful, more epic, more just legendary in action. You should be able to feel that you are truly the champion of whatever cause you are fighting for, and that's what I don't believe in current and modern WoW. I have always gotten that from previous expansions content. I would like to wrap this segment up by just saying that I feel that the questing and the overall feel needs to be amped up, and not in the way Battle for Azeroth is leading us. We will be a champion of our faction, but we've always been a champion of our faction. Even when we were the champion of our class order all, we were always still the champion of our faction. I think just being a champion of our faction doesn't really mean much when we've always been it. They've always called us champion or hero. Why not just low us low and just have us being the regular footman occasionally? When you started off as a champion and then you made us champion of class order hall, why put us back down to something we already were and then claim that it's bright and new when it's always been that way? Well, I'm going to move on to my next point. Overall feel. And you'll probably wonder before that comment happens, what do you mean? What? Overall feel, I mean when I go into a quest zone, the lack of just a clear point, which will be changed in Battle for Azeroth. I think that there's a huge issue with Legion, and this will go on to the point after this, that we deal with small points of a villain. Let's go Highmountain, for example. We deal with part of the Blood Totem tribe. We kill off their leader, but then we pretty much ignore them. We do some world quests, but it doesn't really feel like we push them back. They go right back to the same area, which I know is the problem with dailies, because dailies are dailies, but still, like, putting a random location where NPCs spawn, make tents spawn with them, and say, hey, this is a blood totem area. We need to clear it out. And then after you clear it out, the totems and all of that, the tents will disappear. Poof, gone. To show that you actually did that world quest. It does not feel that we get enough, not credit, but that we are actually infecting the world. You can go back to areas that we helped and it still looks like it's in trouble. I have finished the Suramar campaign. Why are there constantly still demons in Suramar? Why isn't the people that completed that quest line zoned out into a different area where there are no demons? and when a world quest pops up, you just zone back into the previous one. That would be awesome. Why not do that? Or having an NPC, it's like, hey, you finish these quests, you finish the quest line, you could either stay in the pre-finished or you can visit the finished version of an area where the issue, like in Suramar, where there is no civil war going on and it's just peace. That would be cool. I think that they should really add that in, ultimately, just to feel, at least in game, of class agency. And this is going to go on to another point I have of, I feel, especially in Legion, that the game has become too cosmic for its own good. Where we ended the Legion when all worlds couldn't. Which isn't a problem, but like we ended a force that no other world could and tried. Us mortals slowed down and defeated a however weakened world full. I think it's gone to cosmic, and I know with Battle for Azeroth the cosmic levels are tuned down a lot, but even then, there's still the void, which is a pretty cosmic thing when you look at it. I would like an expansion that's not really void based or cosmic based at all. Just, alright, it's a war, something's gonna come up that ultimately splits both factions to the point that we need to join together to deal with this threat. That two rival factions come together. Let's say a group of people leave the Alliance and a group of people leave the Horde and create their own faction, which is threatening both. And that we need to take down that faction. Just something. Besides, the world is not, the end of the world is nigh. Cosmic and any type of role-playing game does not mix well. And with that, I don't really like the direction that we're just defeating cosmic threats. I always thought that the Burning Legion would always be around. That we would never truly deal with Sargeras. We would probably make it to the point that it's impossible to reinvade again. But ultimately dealing with the leader, I don't think should have happened. And the last point I'm gonna have is the death of the classic villains, which isn't a problem necessarily, but the Legion's gone. Queen Azshara is soon gonna be dead. Illidan is imprisoned with Sargeras. All Arthas is dead. All of these classic villains are dead or dealt with. And with Mists of Pandaria, that's not a problem. It did show that they can develop a character throughout an expansion. But when you're constantly doing that, when you're constantly making up new villains, you will run out of ideas and start repeating yourself. I think the Void, and specifically the Void, should not just be pushed away in a single expansion. We should slowly chip away at the Void's true potential throughout multiple expansions and deal with other pressing issues. But then the Void could be, I'm not the core problem of this, but I'm not helping it either. That would most likely be the best outcome, at least for me. The Legion should have never ended, at least in this case. Imprisoning Sargeras, I think, was a bad idea. Argus, the idea for Argus, I think, would have been a good idea if it was done differently. I mean, Argus the Unmaker. It would have been nice for Argus to actually have his own expansion. That we actually truly learn about Argus the Unmaker than just it's a Titan world soul, it's tormented, uh, let's kill it. That's it. And I feel that we really need to just kind of just work things out between questing and villains. I think more villains should be made in the previous expansion and show their slow decline into madness or slowly becoming a villain. I think that questline there should be more epic questlines that have an epic finale that really are memorable. I don't really remember most of the Legion questlines. I think they should finally be able to meld the idea of a class with class mechanics. I think the overall feel of World of Warcraft should be improved. I should truly feel epic. I don't ever really feel like a champion of my faction. That should be improved. This is hard criticism, and this is criticism throughout the expansions. But it feels like in the more current expansions, that being the ones Path to Wrath of Lich King, that all these things are becoming true. Anyway, I would like to end on 3 questions for this video, for the comment section down below. Do you think that there was any epic quest lines in Legion, Warlords of Draenor, or Mists of Pandaria that were truly legendary? Second question. Do you think class fantasy is interrupting class mechanics? Or that class fantasy is ruining some classes just because of class fantasy? Third question. Do you think the cosmic level of World of Warcraft should kind of be cut down to the point that we are just a hero and the NPCs truly deal with the cosmic stuff? We may deal with the manifestation of it, but truly it is not in our hands. We leave that to the superiors, and as a metaphor would go. In that sense, I think we should really do things like that. The Void should probably dealt with someone that can counteract, not just random heroes. Anyway, leave those comments in the section. Leave those what you think should be in the comment section down below. Hope you guys have a great day and just stay cool. Just kidding. But stay awesome. Bye.